Good morning. My name is Chris. We're going to go over an interdisciplinary approach to data product adoption. I think the description says something different about data science. That's fine. I ended up changing the scope partway through. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I'm getting some feedback. Should I move a little bit? Okay. I don't think it'll materially change. Thanks, Pete. So I don't think it will materially change the takeaways, but just so you know, it's expanded to general data product adoption. One thing to note, I used a lot of AI-generated images from Google Gemini, and if you've used that recently, you know that it won't generate images of people, so instead of people, I replaced them with cats, because it seemed appropriate. I think it also goes along with one of the themes, which is don't just focus in on the original solution, which would have just been finding another AI image generator. Find something creative. Like I said, my name is Chris. I live in Michigan, in Mason, just south of Lansing, with my wife and 2 daughters. I've had over 15 years of data experience in various different disciplines. I'm currently a data product owner. I spent the last 3 years with the AI team. I've just been recently reassigned to the data and analytics team doing pipelines and curated data sets. It's my education there if you want to take a look at it. And I also play professional disc golf, and I published a book on using data to play better disc golf. It's my family on the right and my book on the left. Funny thing about that picture, I scrolled through my phone when I started trying to find a picture of my family all together, and I found about 500 pictures of our dog and not a single picture of our family all together. So got on vacation at Myrtle Beach, and I said, first thing we're doing is taking a picture. All right, so we're going to focus a lot on customer engagement with regards to product adoption. I'm actually going to fly through the next couple of slides because our keynote, Shane, really hit on it. Why customer engagement? Well, what do you say? It was about 8% of the problems are technological. Everything else is organizational and cultural. So I won't spend much time on these. The stats that show product adoption is abysmal. And then a study that basically says what Shane said, that there's a whole bunch of organizational, cultural issues that really can all be solved if we engage our customers properly. But what it comes down to is we are not engaging our customers sufficiently. There's the cats. So what do we do about this? What is the solution? Spoiler alert, we have not solved it. Otherwise, I would not be up here. Shane would not have been talking. I'm sure all of you have built many data products that are just not used. So over the last, especially the last 3 years as a data product owner, but even over the last 10, 15 years building any sort of data products, I've been finding that we can't just think about data solutions, that it's important to start pulling in other experts. And I was having challenges, so I went around the organization and asked other people how they were dealing with their issues, and I found some great techniques from other disciplines. So I'm going to, here's a great quote that I found as I was doing research. You need to develop a roadmap to know where you are going and what to do when you get there. And that resonated with me because not only does it highlight that you need to have a plan and a roadmap, but once you get to the end, once you deliver your product, your job is not done. We have to know what to do once we deliver, and there's an awful lot of work that we often forget about. So I'm going to start with consulting, because I think most of us do some sort of consulting in our daily professional lives, pretty soft entry. So I talked with our resident expert on consulting in Jackson, a lady named Allie Lord, who's been consulting for years inside and outside of the organization. I said, Allie, if you were to build a data product, how would you approach it with a consulting mindset so that you have success in adoption? And her response was pretty simple. Just follow the consulting process. So I asked her what that means, and it starts with understanding the problem. So you've probably all heard a customer come up and say, hey, I want this report, I want this dashboard. But the important thing is don't just take them for their word. I'm sure you've experienced that. Just because they say that's what they want doesn't mean it's what they need. So talk with your customer, dig in, and find the underlying root cause of the problem, and then focus on the outcome, not on what they're asking. If we focus on the outcome, what they want to be able to do in the end, then we're much more likely to realize value. And one trap we fall into is with the shiny object syndrome. People come up and say, hey, I want AI in my company or in my area. But the important thing is to ask, are you solving a problem with the AI, and is AI the right answer? Do you really need AI? Or are you simply trying to build AI capabilities? That's fine on its own, but if that's the case, you need to approach it differently. So once you have defined the problem, you need to find the opportunity. And what that means is framing it in an open-ended way. Don't just focus on the first solution that comes up. Find the whole range of possible solutions, and then analyze the context of the environment to understand which one's best. So that would be asking things like, what have you tried before? What resources are available? And asking a lot of questions to understand the culture, such as like data literacy. What might make one solution more or less likely to succeed? And after you have the analysis done, identify the solution that will probably get you closest to the outcome that you're looking for. Again, not closest to what they've asked, but the actual outcome. After you have narrowed down to one or two solutions, ideally one solution, you need to build a strategy. And that means building a roadmap, ideally aligning that roadmap with the business strategy. And the roadmap should include tangible outcomes, steps along the way, an iterative manner so that you can bring your customer along. And remember, you probably already know this, but I'll remind you, just because you build something does not mean that they're going to use it. So Allie wrapped this up with a great quote: "Putting together a robust strategy that speaks to everything you can do for a client will get them to a better outcome than taking one-off solutions without an end mine." So that means when you get a lot of requests, don't just start taking the requests. Understand how they play into the business and the strategy. So next we'll go into business process engineering. And if you're not familiar with that, that is a growing discipline, and there's a lot of opportunity. I've been engaging with a guy named Daniel Linares at Jackson. He's one of our resident process engineering experts. And he's helped us a lot, especially with our more complex solutions like data science. And the way he put it is, process engineering is understanding how the data that you are delivering impacts the process. And that starts by taking a step back and asking if we're solving the right problem. That sounds kind of like the consulting, right? Define the problem with the customer. So from the process engineering standpoint, that begins by mapping out the existing process. And that's one of the things that we often forget to do as data workers. Physically or digitally map out the process and actually make a diagram and show what the process is. And then start asking what the pain points are. And this is the customer engagement that I was referring to. You have to talk to the customer to understand the pain points. You cannot just assume what their pain points are by looking at the process or estimating. Once you have the pain points mapped out, compare that to the data solution that you're building. If the thing you're building aligns with the problems, the pain points, that's probably a good sign you're building the right thing. If the pain points and the problem that you're trying to solve don't align, that's a big red flag that you should probably go back and ask what we're doing here. Next, you need to ask how the data solution will impact the existing workflow. Streamlining and replacing are two very specific terms from process engineering, and I certainly don't have time to get into these in detail, so I highly encourage you to go out and research these on your own as you have time. But Daniel specifically said you use these two terms because you're going to approach the problem differently. If you're streamlining an existing workflow, it's likely that your scope is more narrow, but the requirements are probably going to be a lot more specific because your data has to fit in with the existing solution, has to work nicely with all the parts. Remember, you're not just handing off a data product, you're implementing something, injecting it into an existing system. But then if you're replacing or building a new system, the scope is going to be much larger, which can seem daunting, but at the same time, you probably have more flexibility with your definitions and the way that you implement things. And finally, you need to understand specifically who is going to interact with the solution and how. As a data industry, we are getting better at that. But one thing that Daniel pointed out is, remember, we're not trying to make the people better. We're trying to improve the process. And that's a very important thing to remember. It doesn't matter who is there. If the process is poor, it will perform poorly no matter who is in there. So we need to design the data for the process. And then, of course, we need to understand who downstream will be impacted. If we're handing data to somebody, hopefully they're making a decision with it. If they're making a decision, that means somebody will be impacted by their decision, whether it's customers, other downstream clients, there's stakeholders that will be impacted by their decision, and we need to make sure that they are included in the process and at the very least communicated with. Daniel says that the intention is to demystify process by looking at the right problem and approaching the problem in the right way. We don't want to waste time and effort. And that gets back to if we build something and it's not adopted, that's an awful lot of waste, not to mention it feels awful. User experience. This one's fun. I think most of us have probably dabbled in user experience in our dashboards or reports to some extent. But I engaged Bob Rios, who is one of our user experience experts at Jackson, and he got me realizing that it's not just about the product. When we start thinking about user experience, we actually need to engage our customer much further in the process with a user experience mindset. And we kept coming back to design thinking process, and there are many different models for design thinking. This is the one that we kept coming back to, the understand, explore, and materialize, and I liked it because it's a linear, it shows a linear process, which is what we're used to, especially as analysts. We really like those linear processes, right? But it also emphasizes the need to go back. It's an iterative approach, and don't be afraid to rewind. So it starts with understanding, and that's not just understanding the problem, but that's actually experiencing the problem, empathizing with the user, seeing the problem from their perspective, and then understanding what we don't know. It's easy to list what we do know, but we need to ask what don't we know and how can we uncover that? And once we have that, we can start exploring. The exploring phase, that's where you start iterating. But one of the things that we're not good at as data practitioners and analysts, when we start iterating and prototyping, we like to throw something in Excel, build a dashboard on top of it, but we need to actually start simpler. Think of a whiteboard or a piece of paper and start sketching something out. Because if your client doesn't like the sketch, you can crumple up that paper and throw it out. It's a lot more difficult to start over on a dashboard. So this is starting very simple and going through the process slowly and embracing pivoting the entire way. Once you get to materializing, that's where you really start building something larger. But the important things to remember there are we have to include the customer all the way up through the end. And even once we're in the materialize phase, it's okay to go back, even if we have to go back to the beginning. And that's really difficult to do in a business, in a corporate environment when we are worried about costs, but it's important. One point that Bob made that was very, very important is we need to talk with the customer before we even do our own research or look at the data. And that's hard because as data people, we live on the data. We want to go right to the data and say we can solve this. The problem with that is the research and the data begins framing the problem at the beginning. And once you start framing, you're narrowing the scope, sometimes too soon, and that's when bias can start entering the system. So we need to have early dialogue and ask open-ended questions like what have you tried before, or how might we questions is a good one from design thinking. How might we deliver data in a seamless, unobtrusive way? And that leads to brainwriting, which is similar to brainstorming, but instead of talking out loud, you write it down on a sticky note, and at the end, everyone puts their sticky notes up. That's important also because it helps reduce the bias, it helps reduce the group think, and if everyone starts talking, there's some people that don't really feel comfortable talking up. And this is especially powerful if you're in a room with your customers. If we're all the technical experts, sometimes that can be intimidating to our clients or customers who are less technical. They don't want to look dumb, they don't want to say something stupid, but we don't want them silenced. So try brainwriting. It can have a powerful impact. And design thinking has a very robust tool set. I've already hit brainwriting. Knowledge boarding, I apologize. I was throwing some of this together at the last moment, and I failed to put up an image of a knowledge board. But this is a great tool where it's a simple 4-column tool. On the right-hand side, you have a list of questions that you need to answer. The second column is a list of assumptions that you talk with your customer and just come up with all the assumptions that you're operating under. The third column is for research. Research items that can prove or disprove the assumptions. And then the fourth column is facts. Once you've proved an assumption, you move it over to the fact side. So not only does this help uncover all the assumptions from both sides, but working through these, you actually identify more assumptions that you weren't aware of, and it helps make sure that you and your customer have a shared understanding of the assumptions and the questions that we're trying to answer. And then personas, similar to what I was saying with process engineering. Don't design something for a person. If you're designing for an individual and they leave that role, guess what? You're going to have problems. Think about the role. Design the product for the role. And don't over-optimize for everyone. Just think about the 3 or 4 specific roles that are going to be using your data. Bob's quote is, "Design thinking is a human-centric approach to problem solving. By understanding the customer needs, the team focuses on finding the right problem to explore, testing, and delivering the best outcome." And this one was great because he said it's human-centric, and that's what this is all about. We can solve the technical problems. It's the human side that we're struggling with right now, and that's what we're focusing on here. Pedagogy. Do you know what that is? A couple of you. It's the study of learning. More colloquially, I'm sorry, I practiced that word 50 times, I still can't say it. More colloquially known as learning modes, learning styles. Some people say it matters, some people say that it's not evidence-based, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that everybody has their preferred learning styles. And what we're talking about here is reducing the friction when people first try our product. So I talked with a guy named Jordan from a digital engineering company called Mutually Human up in Grand Rapids. And I said to Jordan, I said, hey, what do you do? What methods do you employ with your external customers to ensure that they're using the stuff that you built? He said, well, I don't really care because we get paid either way, but if we want a good reputation, we focus on their learning styles, adapting our products to their learning styles. So what that means is people like me who like to read, make sure you have some documentation. Don't overdo it, but in text, tell me what I can expect out of this report or why it's built and where the data comes from. Consider having like 10, 15-second video tutorials on how to access a feature, or an audio section for comments. He said one of the things they like to do is actually embed questions into their dashboards for the people who like the self-learning style and like to get in and explore. They'll see this question that they should be able to answer, and it's a game to them. It's a challenge. They go try to answer the question for themselves, and that helps them learn it. Creating an ecosystem for learning, and that's all about the community. There's an abundant number of studies that show that learning can be enhanced as a group, and this is about users supporting each other and answering each other's questions, sharing tips and tricks. And this would be things like communities of practice or communities of excellence, having brown bag lunches, getting people together, or even having an online chat, a Teams channel, or whatever chat channel you have specifically for the product that you're trying to get adopted. And then a simple feedback mechanism. So think about this. If you have a weekly scheduled call with your customer on Fridays, and they open up your dashboard, they open up your report on Monday, and they have a question, chances are by Friday they're either going to forget about it, or they're just going to be so overwhelmed by the week that they're not going to care, and they will not give you feedback, or they just won't ask the question. And that impacts their ability to use the product, and they'll just stop using it. But if you build something like a chat box within the solution, or even an email that's clickable, click the email, bring up a mail to address, and send a quick email, that's a great way to get real-time in-action feedback. Next is marketing. And this one seems obvious, right? You have to market your product, get attention so that people pay attention to it because there's so many things going on. But I'm going to specifically focus on one aspect of marketing, and that is positioning. Positioning through storytelling. You're probably all familiar with data storytelling, right? Create a narrative, get your user hooked, helps with consumption of the data. But the storytelling I'm talking about is product adoption. And that means you have to move the story up a level to your customer. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. This graphic over here from what is it? StoryBrand. This is the universal storytelling model. If you're not familiar with that, what it means is if you look at all the best stories in the world and distill them down to their very basic components, they're all the same. There's a universal storytelling model, and there's maybe 3-4 variations of it, but almost all stories follow the same general path. There's a character who has a problem. That character meets a guide. The guide gives them a plan. The character is forced into action, and through their success or their failure, they are transformed. So you need to move the story up to your customer's level and put them in that story. But the trap that we typically fall into as data practitioners is we position our product as the hero. But that's not what our customer wants to hear. If we want to drive adoption, we have to position the customer as the hero. It's not a matter of, hey, look at this product that we have is amazing. Because we already know it's amazing, but what the customer wants is for them to be amazing. So you have to say, look at what you're going to be able to do with our product. You are going to be the hero. And once you've done that, you need to focus on the character's, the hero's transformation. And that's similar to looking back at the benefits, showing like, hey, this is where you'll be able to go. You're having this difficulty. Here's our map. Here's our guide. That's our data product. With this, look at what you're going to be able to accomplish. Look how much better you will feel. And that's going to get your customer far more engaged than, hey, that's a cool thing. I want to be a part of that story. No, your customer is now the story. Next is change management. You say, well, why do we need to manage change? We're handing off data, right? It feels like a small thing. But if you think about it, like I said, when we give people data, they're making decisions. If we give somebody new data, they're changing the way that they're making a decision. Anytime a decision-making process is changed, that leads to some level of cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance means friction. So that means they're less likely to use our product. So this is just a typical change management workflow. The change management, again, it's huge. There's all sorts of models. This is just a typical one. But what it comes down to is when you manage the change, if you help remove that cognitive dissonance from the customer, they're much more likely to use the product. And that starts with planning and communicating. So we've already talked about the plan and the roadmap, and I'll reiterate, you have to communicate it. If you don't tell your customer, this is what is changing, this is why it's changing, and this is what the expected outcome is, then they're going to have trouble accepting the plan. They won't like it. The second is finding a champion, and this one's hard, especially for if you're an analytical introvert like myself. That's hard to find somebody and say, hey, can you go pitch this for me? You know, we like to walk in and say, this is my product, and explain it. But when it comes to a group of customers, we're typically the outsider. And no matter how much we say, hey, I have a great product, look at this, it doesn't sound the same. They know we're biased. So you need to find somebody in that group that is trusted, that believes in your vision, that can go advocate for you within that client group. Showing the benefit, we've been over that. But there's one thing that I just learned recently from one of my supply chain management instructors, a guy named Dr. Melnick. He had this long lecture on you can't simply show the benefit. You have to look at what somebody is doing and discredit the old way of doing it. You have to actively go in and say, the way that you're doing this is not sufficient, and then show the additional benefit of what you're giving them, the data product. Otherwise, they'll go back to the way they were doing it. So discredit the old way of doing it and show the benefit of your new data product. Prototyping and training, that goes back to the design thinking and the training, like the pedagogy, the learning styles we just talked about. And then monitoring and measuring. Hope that comes naturally to data people, but not only do you have to monitor the actual usage, but you need to measure. You need to understand what the outcome of the original process was and understand and compare that to the outcome of the new process and show that there's a difference, make sure there's a positive lift, because if not, then why are we even doing this? And that once you start monitoring and measuring, that's how you get the sustained growth, sustained usage over time. And this quote was from Jordan. He's one I talked with about the learning styles, but his quote fit perfectly under the change management piece. People are critical. People don't buy the dream. They buy the next step, but if you have a roadmap, you can guide them. And that just talks about the human side of how impactful change can be with a data product, where to us, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but to our customers, it is a big deal, and we have to guide them through it one piece at a time, show them the vision, but also show them the next step. So I'll wrap up with the insight that I gained. Every time I talked to one of these experts, they weighed in heavily on a discipline that was outside of their own core area. And you probably saw that every time I mentioned a concept, I said I tied it back to an earlier discipline. And interdisciplinary approaches are pretty common. They're proven to be effective. But what this showed to me is that we're not quite there yet with the data industry. We need to find more ways to bring interdisciplinary approaches in, concepts from other disciplines. There's a huge opportunity, and if we start looking outside and saying, what challenges do we have that other people are facing in other industries, and pull in their techniques, we're going to make a lot of progress on that 92% that Shane mentioned earlier that is not technical, that's the human side. So we'll move into the Q&A session. Of course, I'm happy to answer any of your questions, but I would really like to hear from you what disciplines you are currently pulling into your data products that help with adoption and what you found success with. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kranti Bandar from University of Michigan. We are yet to start. Hi, thanks for the information of how the data science should be developed. We are yet to start a data science practice at University of Michigan ITS. However, like I wanted to learn or understand like some of the principles, like you said, talk to the customers, what's their pain point is and all that. Mm-hmm. But what are the tools? What tools are necessary for kind of developing something as a data science? Like, should we be taking up on all the implementation, or should we make it self-serve for the customer? What are some of the ideas that you have for data science?
That's a really big question. It depends. It depends on a lot of things. The first is what roles do you have? So someone like me, product owner, I've been working with the AI data science teams for the last 3 years. My job is to go talk with the customers. It's a lot more difficult if you don't have someone in that role. If you don't have a dedicated person talking with the customers, then it's a lot more difficult. So I don't know if I can necessarily get into the tools so much, self-service or what have you. But before you even start getting into that, I think the question is to start asking, what is the purpose of the data science program? Are you just looking to see what you can do with it? Are there certain applications? Are there certain problems that you are trying to solve? And it just starts thinking, the existential question is why? Why are we doing this? Once you get into that, then I can probably be a little bit more specific as far as tools. But the other thing is to think about all the stakeholders involved. So you create a data science program, a team of data scientists, a department. Who are they going to interact with, and who else is going to be impacted? As silly as it sounds, you say, hey, we're going to bring in a couple of AI engineers and start developing AI. Well, the first thing people says is, are my jobs going to disappear? Are you going to automate away my jobs? I mean, I think most of us understand that's not how it happens, but the rest of the stakeholders, they might not know that. So if you're bringing in a data science program, start asking, who is this going to impact? Who are we going to have to work with? Even if it's not automation, there's some people that probably do some sort of analytics, predictive analytics. Talk to them and make sure they understand that you're not going to come up with data science models that do what they do, only better. It's probably going to be collaborative, and there's a way that they can be involved. So think about all the stakeholders and talk to as many people as you can that you think might be impacted. And after that, then you can start getting more specific. Mm-hmm.
Hi. Excuse me. Hi. In one of the slides, you mentioned finding the pain point. Yeah. The challenge that me and my team tend to have is that open-ended question. So what is your pain point? and they don't really have a point of reference, or the pain point only comes up when they're having the pain. So if you're trying to build data science products to bring value to them, can you elaborate, or do you have any ideas on what we could do to spur their thoughts before we ask the question, what is your pain point?
I do, and I love that question because I've been there too, the like, exact same scenario. One of the difficulties that we run into, and I don't know if this is the specific scenario you're in, but we start building data science products because somebody thinks there's a need, but that somebody isn't always the customer who says, I need it for this thing. We have a data science team and resources, and we start going. Once you have your team and you start going, it's hard to go back and say, well, what's your problem? The best way to get in front of it is just talk with your customers, and don't even ask what is your problem, because they probably won't know what their problem is. First, ask them what they do and start understanding their workflow, and then start identifying, that was specifically in reference to the process engineering. So if you're approaching it from a process engineering standpoint, the best way to do it is just a general analysis. Hey, let's map out the workflow and see what it looks like. And if suddenly you get to one place, one node, like if you're actually mapping out a diagram of the workflow, you get to one node where there's 5 arrows going this way, 5 arrows going back this way, or a big question mark, that might be the place to start asking, is this where the problem is? It's really difficult to say, hey, we're a data science team, we've been told to help you, so what's your problem? They're not prepared for that. So at that point, it's just, that's where it comes to empathizing in the design thinking, where they might not know their problem, but everyone has problems, so let's just start talking through. And I will warn you, it's not easy and it's very time consuming. So that's why if you have a role like mine, like the product owner, I can just go in, I can spend a couple of days talking to somebody because that's my job. It's a lot more difficult if you're doing the technical work and working with a customer, but the best thing you can do is just start understanding what they do and sit in with them for a day or two and start understanding where the difficulties are. So I know that was a pretty vague, high-level answer, but that is the best I can do.
Yeah, just in terms of what disciplines do you incorporate, what I've found a lot of success with is mandatory biweekly meetings with the customer, regardless of progress. That really tends to help keep projects on track, regardless, just having that physical meeting once every 2 weeks. Focus on simple first and not getting too attached to solutions. What I've usually found is that if you build an MVP, the MVP becomes the solution, and whatever else you build on later just gets trashed. So that's what I've tended to found. Also, really don't get too attached to solutions. The work that I'm personally most proud of is the one that has literally never been used. So I think a lot of us,
likewise.
Right?
I love that you said that. That is a really good point that I didn't have time to hit on, but when you start building an MVP, so I mentioned that one of the first things we often do is throw data into Excel and build up a dashboard. And so it might be different tools, it might be a quick shiny app or something, whatever it is, that first thing that you build often becomes a thing people latch onto. So that's why sometimes it's great to, the brain writing is great, because before you even start showing visuals, people start showing ideas by writing, and people don't get framed in. And the other thing is the sketching a design. Before you start building anything, if you sketch it on a whiteboard or on a paper, then you can start generating ideas, and people don't get too attached to that. That's where you can start saying, okay, if we were to build this dashboard with these data points and we were to filter it like this, how is that going to work for you? This sounds silly, but Bob helped work me through this, and I've done it a couple of times. Literally on an 8x11 piece of paper, draw out your dashboard with filters and some interactive components. Hand it to your customer and tell them to start tapping on it as if it were a report within an app. It sounds weird and it feels weird. And your customer is going to say, what is going on here? They're not going to like it at first. But that helps get you into their mindset so you can start understanding what they need without building something substantial that potentially will frame them into something that they don't need.
Thanks a lot. There was a lot there.
there was.
Yeah, and so I can say we're doing kind of bits and pieces of that where I am. focusing on maybe user stories and understanding use cases, solving business problems, but we're not bringing in, like, we don't have a coherent strategy like it seems like you have, and bringing in all those different roles. Those don't exist where I am. So I'm wondering, do you do this on all your data products or initiatives? And like, how did you get to the point of recognizing that you needed this? Because I kind of recognize that, but it's hard for me to make the case for that and for building out like a larger team that isn't just data. There's this data implementation, these business analysts, and business process engineering, UX designers. Like, how do you get to the point of where you are now?
So I'm flattered that you think we have a big cohesive strategy, because we don't. my coworkers can attest to that. We staple stuff together a lot. These are just the things that I've tried as a product owner. And what I have noticed personally is that we're lacking, and I get frustrated. I get frustrated when we can't get things done, when my products don't get adopted. So I just went out and started talking to people because I was sick of dealing with some of this stuff. We have that same problem where I've recognized the need, but Jackson as a whole, I don't want to say they haven't recognized the need, but when you consider anything like this, it takes resources. And we have so many things going on that it's hard to pull the resources. Talking with Bob from UX, he's been advocating getting UX into the experience earlier, and it's not that people have pushed back on him, it's just people say, yeah, that's a great idea. We don't have time, we don't have the resources. So we're in the same boat you are. I just happened to put a presentation together because I'm pushing for it. Now, the good thing is, as a product owner, I have enough autonomy in my own role that I can go talk to people as I need to. And that's one of the big things where I only realized what I was doing like a year or so back, and I realized, you know what, I really need to start building this into something more cohesive. So I'm trying to build something, but there's not like an organizational wide thing that says we need this. We just happen to have a team of process engineers. We happen to have a UX team. I just go talk to them. And at some point, I hope that I can share this with other product owners and say, hey, look, here's what we're doing, and potentially get people in sooner. I will say with the process engineering, we did start seeing a large benefit from that, and our customers did too. And once the customers start seeing that benefit, then that's when you can actually start making a case for pulling some more resources.
As a product owner, are you owning like specific dashboards, specific customers? How do you kind of balance understanding the technical underlying stuff in those dashboards and customer, or for those customers, with kind of being the product owner, and the person talking to the customers on the front end?
Yeah, that's probably the most challenging thing. So at Jackson, typically a product owner is supposed to own a product, and you focus on that product. Because data capabilities are still developing, we're not entirely there yet. So I work more with capabilities than I do with products at the moment, but we're slowly shifting. But as far as understanding the underlying technologies, I have a long background in data, like I said, 15 years, so I've seen a lot of things that are similar. So I know the right questions to ask. And beyond that, I rely on guys like Sam and Dan, who are our technical people. Like, hey, I don't know what's going on here. Can you explain it? So it's really about finding the people that you can trust that'll explain it to you. Because if you're working with the customers and the technical side, there's no way that you can keep up. You're basically a unicorn at that point if you know all of that, and that's way above my pay grade. I'm trying to get there, but if you don't have all of that, just find people that you can trust and rely on, and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, first off, my team is brand new to my company, and we're very small. We're a team of 2. Yes, no, it's for just a segment or domain in HR. My question is actually a little bit different. Our customer is on board with us being there, but the current, what would have been maybe the previous product owner, our HRIS team, is safeguarding things. So I'm curious if you're thinking maybe utilizing what you demonstrated today with them, so like empathizing with them, would be the like a best practice to maybe kind of get them on board for like an analytics journey, or if you have another approach. I was just curious, you know, what your feedback or thoughts are around trying to get a team that should be an enabler with you, that's a current detractor. Like, how do you get that buy-in from that group?
Yeah, that's a real interesting one. I've been there a couple of times, slightly different scenarios, but it always starts with understanding why they're safeguarding, why they don't want you in there. And usually they have their good reasons, but showing them the difficulties that it's causing is the first place to start. But I'll be open, that doesn't work a lot of the time. You say, hey, I need to, like if we're, it happens especially if you're a siloed organization and you're working with a different department, you say, I need to get to these end users, but the management level says, no, you work through us before you can talk to them. And it's difficult to show. The best thing that we found is, the best thing I've found personally, and I can't say this will work for you or for everyone, is talk to your customers. Our customers usually have a better understanding of why they won't let you get in, and then use your customers as your champion. So back in that change management that I was talking about, you're the outsider most likely, so no matter what you say, it's not going to be trusted as much. So feed your customer some information, and again, it's not always going to work, but it can get you a step in the door. Say, all right, here's the problem the customer is having. If the customer can show whoever's blocking you how bad of a problem that is, that's a start. And then if they can say, hey, look what these guys can do. If they come in and give us new data, if they can manage the change process of this data, that's a big one, because management hates dealing with change because it's difficult. I hate dealing with change too. So if you can come in and say, look, I can deal with change, or your customers say, I can deal with the change, that'll get you a big step forward. But beyond that, I'm sorry I don't have a lot more answers, because that one is difficult. That's political, and that's not my specialty.
I'm actually just doing some thinking about a similar situation, and I remembered a tool I learned in a different workshop, so I just wanted to share. So my name's Aubrey. I work for a company called Ready Signal. It's a startup in Ann Arbor. We share external data for people who want to use it. Anyway, so what I'm thinking about is convincing my two managers that we need to implement a design thinking process internally for a lot of different reasons. And I'm remembering I took a workshop at Zingerman's, which is, you know, the sandwich company, and they have a tool that it's called, it's their bottom line change tool. And it's basically just speaking to, like, what is the mission of the company? What is most important to you? And how are we getting in the way of those super important things? And so I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this tool, and I'm gonna use it to convince my bosses that we need to do some more design thinking internally, so.
I like that. How are we getting in the way of the company mission? That's a good one. And we have 1 minute left. If there are questions afterward, happy to talk to you separately. Yeah.
Hi, great talk. Thank you.
Thank
you. I've seen a lot of, in my career, a lot of product definitions and, you know, let's say go-to-market plans that were built by an internal audience with sales representing the customer. And I've been in a sales role, so, you know, sometimes sales represents, you know, themselves, and sometimes they represent the customer.
Of course.
Usually it's both. But so, you know, tell me about how large a need it is to get the customer's needs and wants into the conversation, and maybe some examples of, have you ever seen, how would you approach that?
I don't have a good answer for that. I've been in that situation many times, but when you're dealing with, especially if your customer is the CIO or COO of the company and you have to deal with two people intermediary before you can get there, it's really difficult. But like I said, I don't have a great answer, but the best thing we found is constant prototyping. We did a lot of drawings. We had one where we had to build a departmental health dashboard for management who we were 2 layers removed from. So we would literally draw a sketch, pass that sketch along, and he'd say yes, no, and pass it back to us. And as we slowly got there, we started building, you know, building like wireframe designs in whatever tool you want, moving up. It was very difficult, long, drawn-out process, intensive process. That's the best way I found. I'm sure there's better ways, but that's, and then talking to people that might know that person. So if we're 2 layers removed, hey, I have a contact who's over on this team who's worked with that person, go talk to them and say, hey, you have a different perspective. What are your thoughts? That's how to approach it, but by far from foolproof. Well, thank you, everyone. If anyone has questions afterward, feel free to grab me out in the halls, but thanks for coming. I appreciate it.